Okay, well, welcome everyone. If you've come looking for the webinar on featuring Greg Anderson from the National Science Foundation, then you've come to the right place. I just wanted to welcome any newcomers to the IRIS webinar series that we've been organizing here. Just to introduce myself, I'm Andy Frassetto. I am a project associate at the IRIS Incorporated Research Institutions for Seismology headquarters office in Washington, D.C. And so I will be hosting the webinar today. And just if this is your first webinar or you haven't been to one in a while, just wanted to sort of lay out how it works. What we'll do is we'll go through a brief introduction for our speaker, Greg, and then turn it over to him. He'll present for about 45 minutes, sort of a department colloquium style talk, and then we'll turn it over to you guys for questions. And how the questions work is as you're listening to Greg's talk, if anything comes to mind, there's a question box on the webinar control panel. And so if you just type in your question there, it'll come through over to me. And then at the end of the webinar, I will just run through that list of questions and I'll let Greg know who's asking the question. And then I'll repeat that to him, and then he'll have a chance to address your question or concern or comment. So just to lay that out, and then what I wanted to do, everyone should be able to see my screen. I just wanted to show a couple pages related to the webinar series itself, and then the sort of theme for today's webinar, which is the Early Career Investigators Professional Development Focused Webinar. So the page I have up right now is the webinar page, iris.edu headquarters/webinar. And this is where you can go after the fact in a day or two after this is recorded and archived and posted on YouTube. So if you want to show this to somebody else who might have missed it, you would go up here, look for the listing for Greg's webinar, which will be up in a couple days, and then just click on the icon. And that takes you to a YouTube page, which will then begin playing the webinar. So that's a way to catch up on ones that you might have missed. And then just related to the Early Career Investigators program that IRIS has been sponsoring, specifically, we have a webpage /HQ/ECI, which has information related to professional development, whether it be information about funding or professional organizations, or even some practical resources like sharing teaching materials or codes. So do check that out if you're interested. And then finally, just for sort of general information and distribution of resources, we also have a page on Facebook, which is Iris Early Career Investigators ECIs, and you can follow it there. So I just wanted to point out those things, and I think without further ado, I will introduce our speaker today, Greg Anderson, who is a program officer at the National Science Foundation. Just to give you a little flavor for Greg's background, he has a PhD in Earth Sciences from Scripps. He worked as a Mendenhall postdoc at the USGS before moving to UNAVCO. He spent some time overseas in Switzerland at ETH Zurich, and now he's the program officer at NSF, who is mainly responsible for Earthscope and SCEC. And as one of the facilities overseen by Greg, I've had the pleasure of interacting with him a lot over the last year and a half. So I think without further ado, I just want to turn it over to Greg and thank Greg in advance for the webinar today. So Greg, I'm going to change presenter mode over to you.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Let me just get things set up here. All right. So hopefully people are seeing what looks like a regular set of slides. So do we have a title slide up there, Andy? Is it looking right?
Yep, this looks good.
Okay. Thanks for the invitation, and thanks for the opportunity to speak with you all today. It is entertaining to do a webinar from my office when I know there are a bunch of people sitting in various places, so we'll see how this virtually works. I am a program officer at the National Science Foundation, as Andy said. I'm actually really interested in the Early Career Initiative and generally how we can do a better job of communicating with our community, as are almost all of my colleagues, I think, interested in making that work better. So hopefully this will give some answers to some questions that that may be out there. There are a lot of common questions that we get, and I'm hoping I can give you answers that will help answer those for you. I want to say thanks to a few folks in specifics. Some of the slides that you're going to see are drawn from material from three of my colleagues here, Lisa Bush, Barbara Ransom, and Jennifer Wade, who were kind enough to loan them to me. And again, thanks Andy, and thanks to the rest of the UCI crew for the invitation. And those of you on the other end of this, thanks for listening. So where we're going to go with this, basically want to give a little bit of background for folks who may or may not be as familiar with sort of the overall NSF structure and programs, particularly here in the Earth Sciences Division where I work. What does a program officer do? It seems to be a source of mystery for folks. And then a bulk of the talk is really about how you can make a proposal stronger and what are some good tips for making a competitive proposal, and then hopefully answer questions at the end and have a discussion that way. So we'll start off with just some basics. I work at NSF. If you came to this is one end of our building, my office is off in the left side of this picture, actually. You can't see it because I'm inside and don't have a window, but there you go. It is an independent federal agency created by Congress in 1950. Our job is to fund research, education, and technological innovation via proposals that come into us from folks outside NSF. Our budget is around $7 billion a year. We get something like 43,000 new proposals every year, and we have something like 50,000 people around who do reviews for us every year. So this is a lot of proposals coming in and a lot of reviewers being involved in a big community that we support, and that's actually one of the really fun parts of the job. Out of those 43-some-odd thousand proposals, we make about 10,000 new awards every year. Average award is about 3 years long. And that supports something like 200,000 scientists, engineers, teachers, students, educators of various sorts around the country. So that's kind of NSF in a nutshell. We have an org chart that I think I'm sort of obligated to show folks and immediately tell you it's out of date. The reason it's out of date is because the director has undertaken a reorganization, and three of these groups, the Office of Cyber Infrastructure, is not going to be an office anymore. It's moving into the Directorate for Computer Information Science and Engineering, SISE. Two of these other groups, the Office of Integrative Activities and the Office of International Science and Engineering, are coming together and becoming what's called the Office of Integrative and International Activities. And then the Office of Polar Programs is coming into the division, the Directorate of Geosciences as a division. So we're going to have these changes, but this is where things are going. I spend my time here in the Geosciences Directorate. In particular, I'm in the Earth Sciences Division in Geo. There are four divisions, the Atmospheric and Geospace Sciences, the Earth Sciences, Ocean Sciences, and now Polar Programs. EAR is divided into two groups. Then one of them is called the Surface Earth Process section, and the other is Deep Earth Processes section. And there's a bunch of core programs and programs that span across these sections. And I should emphasize, this is really only part of what's going on in the Earth Sciences Division. There are a lot of what are called cross-cutting programs and cross-cutting initiatives that have links to groups outside of the Earth Sciences Division all across NSF, and I don't have those on this figure because it would be ridiculously complicated if I tried to put it all in there. EarthScope is in bold simply because that's where I spend most of my time. And the ones that are in pink are the ones that cross over a variety, or sort of pink anyway, cross over a variety of the structural boundaries inside EAR. We fund research in all of these sorts of fields and do that on a regular routine basis. So with that background, one question that a lot of people ask is, what does a program officer actually do? And there's a lot of misconceptions out there. You may have heard the statement that software engineers are machines for turning caffeine into code. And some folks have joked that program officers are machines for turning caffeine into decisions about proposals. But what we actually do, what we spend most of our time with, is a variety of activities. All of these in some way related to getting proposals through the system, reviewed, and getting decisions, and hopefully getting funding out for the proposals that we can fund. So we do a wide range of things. We write solicitations. To do that, first you've got a program you're going to go with, and then you want to make decisions about the sorts of things, the sorts of science that program is interested in supporting, and what are the ground rules for how the proposals need to go. And there's discussion internally about how to do that, and sometimes conversations with community at meetings to pick up ideas for how things ought to go, and then we write solicitations. We then run the review process for proposals that come in response to those solicitations. Once that's done, the ones that we're going to be able to make awards on, oftentimes we'll have to do revisions of budgets and things with PI, so we have discussions about that. And then in the end, we make a recommendation, our final recommendation for each proposal. And the point that I'm going to emphasize throughout this is we make recommendations. We don't actually make funding decisions. There's really only two groups at NSF that do that. The Division of Grants and Agreements is one of them, and it's the one that most normal science proposals and education proposals deal with. We make recommendations to them. They make the decision in the end. We also oversee awards once the awards are made, and when you file your annual reports or your final reports, we're the ones that are reading it. If there's a change in scope that's needed, if you need to have some kind of a no-cost extension or something like this, you need to get some change to your award, we're the guys that you talk to. We're the folks that deal with that. But probably our most important role is the one that's in bold here. We do a lot of answering of questions and a lot of giving of advice. And so if you remember absolutely nothing else in this talk, remember the following sentence. It's okay to call your program officer. We really are not going to get frustrated or angry or irritated or any other negative emotion that you want to mention. People seem to have a fear of doing that. And in fact, that's really kind of the basis of our job, is to interact with our community of scientists and educators that we support. And so don't hesitate to call us. Well, if you do, sure, you want to treat us as you would treat anybody else that you respect, and treat us kindly, and that's fine. But don't be afraid to call. The worst thing that's ever going to happen if somebody calls me to talk to me about an idea for a proposal is I might have to say, I can't talk to you today. Let's set up an appointment. There's another question that goes with this that often people ask, should you email first or call first? And honestly, it depends on the program officer. Some of us really don't mind getting phone calls right away. Some people like to do everything by email and then do phone calls. So probably your best, safest bet is to send an email first, but you could go either way. It just sort of depends on the person. But don't hesitate to contact us. That's really the core of our job. If you are going to get in touch with us, the only thing otherwise I would suggest is do your homework first. If you've got questions about a possible proposal going into a program, take a look at the program solicitation. We'll talk about this in a few minutes. Do some thinking about that. If you have questions about whether or not a particular project might fit, be prepared to tell us about your project in a short summary. Sometimes people will even put together a little one-page summary and then send that off with the initial email saying, here's what I want to talk to you about when you have time to set up an appointment. Totally fine to do that. Bonus points to those of you who will recognize the source of the original quote that I have, in fact, tweet for this talk. But if you're thinking about writing a proposal, you want to think about your muse and how you get your proposal done. And so here is the muse Clio to tell you, yeah, Greg's being overblown, but let's just do the tips. So a competitive proposal. Nobody wants to write a non-competitive proposal. We take that as granted. It has 5 basic questions you have to have clearly laid out in order to really have a competitive proposal. First is, what do you want to do? What is the research topic? What is the problem? What is your hypothesis about whatever subject it is that you're looking at that you want to test? Or if it's not necessarily hypothesis-driven, if there's a fundamental sort of discovery mode, you're going to go out and see what you learn. What are you trying to find out about? Once you've got that, why is it important to go and look at that problem? And more than just why is it important to a specific subfield, but why is it important over the broad range of the science that this might be embedded in? Because think about it, in the end, your proposal is going to be reviewed by folks who may be specialists in that area, but a lot of them are going to be generally educated in some area of earth science, may not be in that specific subspecialty. It needs to be clear. So why is it important, and why is it important in a larger context? What do you know about it already? What's in the literature? What have people already pinned down? What's some pilot work that maybe you have done that's in the proposal to say, here's what we already know? And if the proposal were funded and the project went forward successfully, what would you learn? You know, what are we going to find out about this problem that you have that you want to solve? Those three questions kind of go together. You really sort of have to have them bundled up together in your proposal to really make it a good competitive proposal. And then, of course, you have to explain how you're going to do the work and have your clear methods. And really, how are you going to test this problem? One of my colleagues I was talking with about this talk earlier suggested emphasizing that one of the things that makes a proposal really competitive, that takes it over the step, is really to make sure that you cycle back in writing up your methods. How is each one of the things that you want to do going to test the question that you want to test? So if you've got, this is especially true if you've got a project that actually has 2 or 3 or more sub-problems and multiple methods that you're going to apply. How does each method map into these problems? And make that really, really crystal clear. That helps with the review process. It helps make your proposal more competitive. So then once you've got this idea, and it isn't a bad idea to sit down and sort of write this out at, not all the details, but at a summary level, so you've got it in your head and it's kind of fixed a bit. Bounce it maybe with a trusted colleague or something so that you've got a bit of a fix. And then you have to start thinking, okay, where am I going to submit this proposal? First step is to find out what are the opportunities out there. There are new ones all the time. The ones that have been there for a while often change. So how do you go about doing that? There's a variety of sources. Obviously, you can talk to one of us program officers at a meeting someplace if you run into us. Give us a call maybe, but run into us in a meeting, there may be something out there that's just come out that we can tell you about. We're happy to do that. Oftentimes, when I give a talk at some kind of a big group, like go to the IRIS meeting or go to the EarthScope meeting, I'll get up and give a talk at the beginning. And one of the things I'll tell folks is, here's some new opportunities that are coming down the pike. Next thing is to look at the NSF website. If you go to the NSF website, nsf.gov, and you go down to the bottom corner in the right, there's a thing here that you can select to do a search by program area. And if you do that, it pops up something where you can find the geosciences, for example. A whole bunch of other ones too, of course. You can also go up to the quick links at the top, and that brings up a page where you have similar sort of a list of things. And in either case, when you do that, it takes you to the GEO homepage. And from there, you can, right in the middle of the page, find some 2 lists, one of recently announced funding opportunities and one of due dates that are coming up. But you can also get a list of all of the other opportunities that are in GEO, and you can get links to all of the divisions inside the Geosciences Directorate as well. This is true not just for geosciences, but for biology and for math and physical sciences and so on and so forth. But geosciences is where I spend my time, so that's where these examples are coming from. Another thing you can do is you can sign up on their website for an email alert that will come out and tell you when something new has popped up. You can also increasingly go to things in social media. The NSF has an active Twitter feed and an active Facebook page, and oftentimes announcements of opportunities are made on those things at the same time as they're made through what you might think of as more traditional venues. And you can look at grants.gov, and on the left side there in the red sidebar, there's one that says Find Grant Opportunities, and it lists a whole set of places that might be possible homes. Once you've done that and you've narrowed it down to a list of programs that might sort of look promising, at least they sound like they might be a possible home, then the next step is to get the solicitation for that program or the program announcement. Not every program does the solicitation. Some do program announcements, some do other mechanisms. I'm just going to talk about solicitations because for the Earth Sciences Division, that's pretty common. Each one has the name of the program in it, the deadlines coming up, if there are any. Some have deadlines. Some have what are called target dates, which are dates that it's good to have your proposal in. If it comes in later, it may go to a later panel, this sort of thing. And some programs at NSF don't have a deadline at all. They accept proposals at any time. It also has a section on revisions. If you've submitted to a program before and you've grabbed the solicitation before, don't assume the rules are the same because they do change periodically, and that's where you'll find out what has changed. There's a synopsis in there about what is the program about, what is it focused on, who are the program officers. So once you've read through this, now you know who to contact. About how many awards do they typically make in a given year in the program, and about how much money is available in the program. These numbers are sort of general guides. You can use them then to start to get an idea of what maybe an average award size might be based on the amount of money and the amount of awards. Give you a sense of what's going on there. You'll also find information in there about who's eligible. Obviously, you don't want to submit to a program to which you're not eligible. It'd be a waste of everybody's time. Most of the programs have fairly similar eligibility, but there are programs that have separate rules that you really need to go and look at. So make sure to be careful about that. And then sometimes programs have special review criteria beyond the two standard large NSF review criteria. And if they are there, they're going to be used as part of the review, which means your proposal needs to be able to address those as well. So you need to know about them up front. So solicitation is where you get those answers. The next thing to do is to go and download the Grant Proposal Guide, the GPG. And yes, NSF is an acronym-rich environment. We have lots of these sorts of things. I'm going to do my best throughout this talk to not use any of them, or at least to tell you what they mean if I do. So Grant Proposal Guide. It's important to grab this. This is the manual that tells you all of the, really the big rules for NSF proposals across the foundation. And you need to do it regularly because there are changes. Just this year, in particular, the one that came out in January, has a number of significant changes. If you've been putting in proposals for a long time, some of these are going to be pretty big changes in the way things are done. If this is new for you, then at least now you know what the rules are. Either way, go and get the Grant Proposal Guide and look for the changes. The changes are always listed right at the front so that you can find them. In particular, there are some changes to the review criteria this time around. As a reminder for everybody, NSF has two main review criteria. We have what's called intellectual merit, which effectively is the potential to advance knowledge in a field or across fields. And then there are the broader impacts, which really, in some sense, are the potential to benefit society or contribute to some desired societal outcome. I will tell you there's a website there at the top, and as Andy said, this will be archived and available online, and so you'll have these links. But there's a lot of information on that website. One thing that is a common question, both of these two criteria are equally important, and there are some changes this year in the way that things are done to sort of emphasize that aspect for folks. There are 5 elements that are going to be used to judge a proposal, starting the ones that came in on January 14th or any more recent than that, both for the intellectual merit and for the broader impact. The first is similar to the previous slide. What is the potential to advance knowledge and understanding? That's for the intellectual merit. What is the potential to benefit society? That's the broader impacts. And then for each of them, there are additional questions. One of the big things that has come from the National Science Board is a directive that NSF should have an emphasis on truly creative or potentially transformative research and education concepts. So there's a bias in favor of that. They really want us to be looking for that sort of thing. So the question is, to what extent does this proposed set of activities go in that direction of being potentially transformative? Does it have a good plan? Is it a reasonable plan? Is it sound? Does it have a reasonable budget? Is it a way of going forward with this? Do you actually have, and this is especially important for the broader impacts, but to some degree also for the intellectual merits, but how do you measure success in what you're doing? How do you know that what you wanted to do actually worked or not? Obviously, you need that for the intellectual merit. If you have some idea, for instance, on the broader impacts of getting involved with teacher training or something like that, how do you assess the outcome of that training? How do you know that you actually had an impact? So having that in your proposal is a key thing. How well qualified is the person or group doing the proposed work? So obviously, there are people that are going to be looking at prior work and background and what have they put in the proposal to demonstrate that they can do it. And then fundamentally, are there going to be adequate resources, both overall at the institution that the work would be done in? Are they asking for enough support in their project? do they have the ability to do that based on what they're asking for in the proposal? Another big change is the beginning of every proposal, there's something called the project summary. It's a one-page summary that lays out, here's what we want to do in a brief form, here is the intellectual merit behind what we want to do, and here are the broader impacts behind what we want to do. This year, there are actually a change to the way Fastlane is the system that people use to submit proposals. At some point, that will be moving over to research.gov, but still right in grants.gov perhaps. But right now, this is still coming in through Fastlane. There are 3 boxes. You have to put some text in every box. One of them is for the overview that I talked about. One is the intellectual merit. One is the broader impacts. Total of 4,600 characters or less. You have to have something in all of them, or Fastlane will not accept the proposal. You won't be able to submit it. So you really have to do that. That's just the news on this one. This is in the grant proposal guide. Some other changes that are this year, the project description, which is what you think of as the sort of bulk of the meat of the proposal. What are you actually going to do and how are you going to do it? You must have a separate section now on the broader impacts. And the section on any prior NSF support and the results from that prior support they have to separately address both the intellectual merit and the broader impact side of things. It's useful to know, just as a reminder for folks, on the prior support, you only need to cite the single, if you have prior support and if you have one or more prior awards, you only have to cite the results of the one award that is most closely related to the research that you're proposing now. You don't have to have more than one, and every PI involved will have to have, that has had prior funding has to have one. But again, only the most closely related one. You don't have to have 2 or 3 or 4, and sometimes we get proposals where people spend a lot of space talking about a lot of the prior results when they really only needed to talk about one, and it gives them more space. In the back of the proposal, there's a biographical sketch for all of the senior personnel in there, and this year there's a big change. You used to have a list of publications that you needed to submit that were closely related to the proposal that you were putting in. Now you can put in what are called products. It can be a publication, but it can also be a data set or an instrument patent or software or something like this that is out there. It has to be citable. You have to have some source that you can point somebody at to go and get it. I found an interesting article in Science Magazine that was actually an interview with our policy office folks who said that blog posts and things like that, no matter how well documented or how well commented, don't count, unfortunately. There's a lot going on in the science domain these days in blogging, but it's useful to know that you can't count that, but you can count data sets, software tools, things like that. And this is not new. It's been there for a while, but it's a good reminder that all proposals have to have a data management plan. And if you are requesting support for a postdoctoral fellow, and it's formal, but on the budget page in the proposal, there's a line that says postdoctoral support. If you're asking for money on that line, you have to have a postdoc mentoring statement in the proposal in the back. So those are, the last ones are not changes, but the other ones are new. One more set of changes. On the 15th of March, Fastlane is now going to start automatically checking every submission for all of these required elements, keeping in mind that the postdoc mentoring statement is only required if you're asking for postdoc funding. If you don't have every one of these elements in your submission, you will not be able to click the submit button. There is, I will just tell you, 0 wiggle room on that one. They are enforcing this very thoroughly. And so I can't encourage you strongly enough to make sure that your submission is ready to go, not at 4:59 p.m. proposers local time, because you need, if something goes wrong, you need time to fix it and make sure that it's there. So start putting things in early so that you can have this ready to go in case something goes wrong on the first time you try to submit and you have time to go back and fix it, because Fastlane is not going to give you any, you're not going to be able to cut any slack there. All right, so that's kind of, you've done your homework. You've thought about what it is you want to do, how you want to do it, why does it matter, what are we going to learn that's new, what's the context. You've gone and you've tried to find a possible home for this proposal. You've read the solicitation and said, okay, this might actually work. You've got the grant proposal guide and made sure that you're thinking about all the things that have to be in there based on the rules that are in the grant proposal guide. Your next step is to get in touch with your program officer, because we're really the ones that can answer any lingering questions. And some very common questions are on this page. You know, would this idea fit? Well, okay, so we're going to need to know what the idea is. In that circumstance, sending a little one-page summary by email and saying, I'd like to talk to you about this is really good. It gives us time to think about it. Will this work or not? We won't hesitate to say, yes, it will, or no, it won't. We won't hesitate to say, you know, it could fit here, but you might want to think about talking to so-and-so because it might fit better over in that program. It might have a better chance over there. There's always the option, too, that we could look at it and say, you know, yeah, it could fit for us, or it could fit in this other program, and maybe the two programs could look at it together if you wanted to submit it that way. All of these are options. The next question is, what can I do to make the proposal more competitive? Other than the things that I've already talked about here, some programs, there are things that I can tell you the answer to that right away. For EarthScope, for example, the more competitive proposals are citing the EarthScope science plan that was put out in 2010, actually going in there and saying, this bullet point, okay, I'm going to take that bullet point and put it in the text of the proposal, and then I'm going to say, we will answer the following question in the following way. Not every program has that, of course, but everyone has a solicitation, and you can cite things out of the solicitation that this will help you address. So that's a trick, but there's others that depend on what program you're going to. So talk to your program officer. How will proposals be reviewed and how will the final decisions be made? That is in the solicitation, but it never hurts to confirm and make sure that you understand what's going on. There are lots of different ways to review proposals. I'll tell you how the standard way works in EAR, but it's not the only way that it's done, and so it depends on the program. You can also get a sense of how much money is likely to be available for proposals, what's a reasonable budget for a proposal into the program, what's the success rate for projects that come into the program. One of the things on the budget, what's a reasonable budget, there's two sides to that, of course. You don't want to ask for less money than you actually need to get the work done. But you can come forward with a really great idea, but if it needs so much support that it just can't fit within the capabilities of the program to provide support, it's a real problem. So you have a mismatch potentially there between the ambitions and the realities of what we have available. So having a conversation with the program officer at an early stage of the development of your proposal lets you deal with that problem right away. So again, if you don't remember anything else I said, getting in touch with your program officer after you've done your initial homework, absolutely wonderful. Don't hesitate. It's not going to have negative things going on. Nobody's going to get irritated. That's what a lot of us live for. That's our job, really. For me personally, there's nothing more interesting than a phone call from a PI out there that says, "Hey, I've got this great idea. I want to do this thing. What do you think?" And then being able to, at some point later, be able to write an email saying, "Hey, we are able to fund a proposal. This is great." But never hesitate to get in touch once you've done your homework. So the review process kind of looks like this, I suppose, if folks aren't really aware of how it works. You submit a proposal, and some process happens, and out the end a decision comes. It doesn't really work that way, of course. The way it really works, I want to emphasize again, in EAR, this is in the Earth Sciences Division, this is how things generally are done. It's not true for every organization at NSF. It's not true for every program at NSF, but generally this is how it's done in the Earth Sciences Division. Get your proposal and you submit it into the program. Eventually it comes to the desk of a program officer for that program. Our job is then to take all of the proposals that we've got and go through them and then send them out for what we call ad hoc or mail review. They go out to a bunch of independent folks who, it's a wide range. Some of them are going to be technical experts in the particular topic that you're going to go after. Some of them are going to be experts in the broader field that that topic exists in, and some of them are going to be broader than that. But they're all technical folks, all have the right background to understand what's going on, and we're looking for a wide range of feedback. Typically, you'll have anywhere between 3 and 7 of these people looking at the proposal. They go through a process. They send their reviews back. The reviews come back to the program officer. And I want to emphasize, these are then the reviewer's recommendations on things, the reviewer's thoughts on the proposal that go to the program officer. We then in EAR have a panel that follows after this. It's another group of experts that we've brought together. These are usually, in total, a group with quite a breadth of understanding of the areas that are covered by the proposals that the program has. They're technical experts again, but it's going to be a wide range of folks in the room typically. We take the proposals to the panel. Panel takes a look at them. They each make a recommendation on what they think we ought to do with the given proposal. And again, so now we have the recommendations from the male reviewers, ad hoc reviewers, the recommendations from the panelists. What should we do with these proposals? And then those recommendations get combined with lots of other factors. And I can't emphasize enough that there are lots of other factors. We look at things like how much funding do we have available in the program? How much funding can we get by discussions with other sources of funding here at NSF? Where is the PI in their career? Is this a new early career person? Is this a very established person? If it's a new early career person, you might end up giving somebody a little bit more leeway, a little bit more slack, understanding how things are going. You might also want to emphasize early career folks who are just trying to get established. If you had two proposals that were equally good from somebody who was well established and somebody who was just starting off, you might, under certain circumstances, want to go towards funding the one from the early career person to help them get started. If you have two proposals that are equally good and you've got one from a very, from a principal investigator with a fair chunk of funding versus one from somebody who doesn't have any NSF funding, if everything else were equal, you might go towards trying to fund somebody who has not had much funding in the past. You look at portfolio balance. You look at the size of institutions that are getting proposals coming in. You look at where they are geographically. You look at a whole host of things. So we take these recommendations from the reviewers very seriously. We then combine them with a bunch of other information that we have, and then we make our recommendation. And our recommendation goes to our division director, DD it's called, DD Concur, and our division director looks at it and says what she thinks about what our recommendation is. And then you have a branch point. Branch point number one is we can recommend, and our division director concurs with, declining the proposal. And the proposal would come back to you. You would, when that declination happens, you would get the reviews, anonymous form, of course, but you get the reviews, you get our comments on the proposal, and we're happy at that point to sit after you've reviewed all of that stuff and read it and understood it, to sit down and talk if it will be helpful to you in making a decision about what you want to do next with that proposal. The happier end of the branch is that we recommend an award, that our division director concurs with the recommendation for an award, and then it goes to what we call DGA, which is the Division of Grants and Agreements. And DGA is actually the only group to deal with regular science proposals. There's one other group in NSF that's the same role, but DGA is the group, the Division of Grants and Agreements is the group that says yes or no and can make that final actual decision as opposed to a recommendation. And then if they say yes on an award recommendation, the institution, your institution gets the award, and then the project is off, and you can go ahead and do the work that you wanted to do. So it is a complex process. There are lots of stages along the way. Hopefully it's a little less black boxy for you, at least after hearing about it now. And I should emphasize again, this is how it's done in much of the Earth Sciences Division, but there are other ways of doing it in other parts of NSF. Some other general tips. Put yourself in the reader's shoes. Do as much as you can to make their job easy. Because the people who are reviewing your proposal, again, they are just like you. They're busy people. They have a lot going on. They're volunteering. The ad hoc reviewers don't get paid. They do this as a volunteer effort. They're trying to understand the proposal and trying to make sure that they can go with it. Some of them may have a great deal of technical knowledge in a particular area. Some of them may be more generalists. And so you need to make it easy for them to see where you're going with it. If you can think about questions that somebody is going to ask you, and often you can do that by going to a trusted colleague and saying, here's what I've got in mind, and then listening to the questions that they ask, and then you go back and you say, okay, I've got to fix that, fix that, fix that. But if you can answer their questions before they're even aware that they have them, that's really a good benefit. make sure that your research plan does address those 5 key questions that I mentioned at the beginning. And if you can do that clearly, that's going to make the proposal more compelling. Everybody involved with the review process is human. Keep in mind that your proposal may be discussed fairly late in a process of a panel, and so making it easy for people to see it and read it and understand it, making it stand out because it's got an exciting spin on the science that you want to do is a really good way of making the proposal compelling and going forward. Doesn't necessarily guarantee any particular outcome, but it makes things more compelling. And just some final places to look for inspiration as you're putting a proposal together to make it that much better. There are 2 different ways you can do a search for what NSF has funded in the past. You can go to research.gov and you can also go to nsf.gov, and both of them have word search capabilities. Go in, you can search by some set of keywords, date, by program, by a variety of other parameters, and you can get a list of what people have been funded to do. You can get the abstracts for those funded proposals, and you can see what's going on and kind of get a sense for what gets funded in the given program, what's being done recently, et cetera. NSF has a couple of guides online. I should emphasize they're a little bit older, but there's a proposal writing guide and a project evaluation handbook online. We do host targeted workshops, proposal writing workshops, and we do webinars like the one I'm doing now, which are also resources that are out there for you. And again, you're a program officer. That's our job, is to be here to be doing this and to be helping to answer questions. So to sort of summarize it all, what's a competitive proposal? It's a proposal that is a good idea, that's well expressed, that's easy to follow. You have clear methods for how you're going to do the project, how you're going to evaluate whether it succeeded or not. A truly competitive, truly compelling proposal is going to be exciting. Somebody's going to look at it and go, yeah, wow, this is a really interesting idea. We should go for this. You're going to have realistic and well-justified budgets that are realistic and well-justified and compatible for the program that you're submitting to. And it has to meet all of the ground rules. It complies with the solicitation, it meets the merit review criteria, it meets the rules that are in the grant proposal guide. So this is a competitive proposal. I wish I could say that the answer is that's a proposal that will get funded, because again, there's lots of other things that enter into the mix, but this is a proposal that is competitive, and that's the sort of the best edge I can give you at this point. Longer term things, other things that are there to help build that up. You don't really get good at writing and submitting proposals without writing and submitting proposals. This really is kind of one of those things you have to learn by doing. So be active with your ideas, and as soon as you can, write and submit proposals. If you get asked to be a reviewer or to serve as a panelist, if you can, that's a really good thing to do, because obviously it helps us out. We're grateful for it. It also gives you an insight into what your colleagues, what your peers think are interesting things to propose, interesting science to go and do. It gives you a sense for what sort of a pulse of what's going on in the community today. And then come and talk with us program officers. We go to meetings, and when we're there to both see what's going on with projects that we've already supported, we're recommended for funding. We're there to talk to other folks who have ideas about what it is that they would like to do, and we're there to sort of get a pulse of the science. So one of our jobs while we're there is to talk to folks who might want to submit a proposal. So don't hesitate to say, hey, if you're coming to this meeting, can we get together? If you're in the area around NSF, and you can give us some warning, people often have time to sit and talk for a little while with folks who come to visit. That happens not all that rarely. And if you're later in your career and you're thinking maybe it's time to do something a little different for a couple of years, there are positions open from time to time at NSF for folks to come in and be a program officer. There's a position available in EarthScope. There are other ones out there. There's a Dear Colleague letter that's out there on the Earth Sciences website that invites folks who have the right qualifications to come forward. So if you're at the right time of your career, that's also an option. And so to wrap it all up, basically the take-home message is have a good idea. Find an appropriate opportunity for your idea, an appropriate home for it to go to. Follow the solicitation and the grant proposal guide in order to understand the rules. Call your program officer to talk to him or her about the rules, about the idea, what it is you want to do, and do your best to understand the process and get involved in the process. And all of this together helps you be more successful in your career in the end. That's kind of basically the best message I can give you. And I'll just end it by saying thank you and putting up contact info. If folks want to get in touch with me afterwards, I'm totally happy to have people get in touch with me. Me personally, I don't mind phone calls, but email often works best. So that's the way to go. So Andy, that was 40:27 according to my clock here. Do you have any questions?
Perfect. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you very much, Greg.
Well, thank you again.
Yeah, no, our pleasure. So there are three questions lined up. Four. I would encourage everyone else as I'm going through these with Greg. Feel free to submit additional questions if they come up. And yeah, why don't I just start with Emily Beverly's question. She submitted this question fairly early in the talk. Question was, if a program accepts proposals at any time, is there still a best time to submit it? And what is the usual turnaround time?
Okay. Well, Emily, I can try to answer the back end of that question first. NSF has a goal overall of giving an answer back to a PI on a proposal 70% of the proposals received within 6 months of the date they were received. And that answer is, if you remember this slide on the review process, it's when you get to that stage. And so you get an answer back from the division director one way or the other within 6 months. That's the 70% of proposals within 6 months is the goal. For those programs that don't have a specific deadline and accept proposals at any time, the best bet is actually, as I said before, is actually to contact the program officer, because typically what the program officers will do is they will bundle proposals together into a group, and then when they're putting together a panel, they'll figure out, okay, we're going to take this group of proposals to a panel at this time. And they can give you a sense of when's the latest day you could get it in and go to panel at this period versus if you came in another time, we'll accept it, we'll put it out for review, but it won't go to panel until some other time later. There isn't really a one-size-fits-all answer other than get in touch with the program officer for that particular program.
Okay. Next question is from Dan Sugar, and he asks, can you briefly explain what programs are specifically aimed towards early career investigator types?
Yes, so I can name a few off the top of my head, and we can go from there. So early career investigators, I'll start with graduate research fellowships. There's a program at NSF for graduate students who want to get a support directly from NSF for a particular project, and that program is called the Graduate Research Fellowships. There is also support at NSF in the Earth Sciences Division. We have a program called the Education and Human Resources Program. The director for that is Lena Patino. And there is a postdoc fellowship program where you can write your proposal to get money for a postdoc for a couple of years through this program. And that is aimed at folks who are early in the process. And for a little bit further along, somebody who's in the next stage of things, there is the career program, which is an NSF-wide program. It's aimed at folks who are pre-tenure, but they have a tenure track position or are about to have one at the time that the award would go if it were to be awarded. And this one these are big awards. These are sort of the flagship. If you get one of these are great. It's really there to jumpstart somebody's career, hence the name. And it has a research component and a strong education component and a linkage between the two of them. And the person in the Geosciences Directorate who's responsible for that mostly is Sonia Esperanza. But those are sort of the three flagships that leap to mind. There are other options out there as well, and I recommend going and looking there. But A good person to talk to about it and start with an email to her would be Lena Patino, and Lena can point you in the right direction.
Okay, I have a question from Anonymous. The question is asking, what if there are two or more program managers, some have 5+, how do you know which one to write to, or should you write to everyone at once? What if one is it's sort of a tiered question, but I'm just going to read it all. What if one writes/calls back and is moderately helpful, then you try to contact them again and they don't respond? Can you contact the others?
That's an interesting one. I don't know that I've ever had that question asked before. It's true. Many programs do have more than one program officer, and generally we are in communication with each other with our fellow program officers. And so if somebody calls and says, "Hey, I want to talk to you about such and such," they'll come by, and the other program officer will come to our office and say, "Hey, I got a call from so and so who's interested in this," and that goes on. I don't know that there's a specific best answer, best approach for that. I think that you could send an email to any one of them. You could send an email to all of them, and whoever gets it first would answer first, I suppose. Or whoever can answer first would be the one to pick it up. Beyond that, I don't really have a great recommendation. It's not like the order of the names on the website or on the solicitation necessarily has any kind of sense of who the best person to contact is first. It's sort of unfortunate in that way, I suppose.
Okay. Before I ask another question, I forgot to ask my survey question at the beginning of the webinar, which was, if you're a person who is listening to the webinar right now and you're with a group of people, would you please just text me how many people you're watching it with? I'm just trying to keep a running tally of sort of group viewership. Anyway, sorry to interject there. Next question is from Alyssa Scheel, and she asks, what advice do you have for competitive proposals that are aimed at acquiring instrumentation? And then she asks MRI or IF as examples.
Right. So in your sciences division, we've got the Instrumentation and Facilities program, which has two program officers. Right now we've got David Lambert and Russell Kells, who are the program officers for IF. And then for bigger sized proposals, typically there is an NSF-wide program called the Major Research Infrastructure, the MRI program that's there to help support these sorts of things. So, Andy, remind me of the details of Alyssa's question. I just was wanting to make sure I explained the acronyms for folks.
It was MRI and IF were the two options, just for which potentially would be better for acquiring instrumentation.
Right. Well, I think the answer to begin with is it depends on the scale of what you want to do. If you're looking for something big, MRI is the better place to go. MRIs will go up to $4 million a year as a project. And then there are, for IF, it's usually not quite that size. You could start with a conversation by email with David or Russ, or David and Russ, and they can give you further guidance. But that's certainly the first thing that leaps to mind. If it's big, I would go look at the MRI program. The other thing to keep in mind is that typically institutions only have a certain number of slots to go forward with an MRI proposal. And so there's often intra-institutional competition for those slots, and so that adds an extra level of complexity to things. So if folks are thinking about an MRI proposal, you typically have to start a little bit earlier because often, as I say, you have to compete with others at the institution to be able to go forward, which makes it even more worthwhile to have a conversation first with Russ and David. And my suggestion of Russ Kells is that Russ is, for the Earth Sciences Division, one of the main folks for the MRI competition as well. So Russ has a good sense of both of those things.
Okay, next question is from Dan Bauer. He asks, do you have any specific advice for what makes a strong postdoc proposal in general? I think many schools do not allow postdocs to be PIs, which means the postdocs that wish to be PIs on their own proposals are presumably flush through fewer channels, NSF, EIR, PF, for example.
Right. So the NSF EARPF that is referred to there, that's the postdoc fellowship program that I was mentioning that runs through Lena Patino's Education and Human Resources program. Those proposals actually come in from the individual who's trying to become a postdoc, and the difference. One of the big fundamental differences between those awards, when an award is made, versus a regular NSF award, is that award is actually made to the postdoc as a person, as opposed to some institution. This is where I wish I had in front of me, and I can bring it up. Andy, can I stop showing my screen so I can look this up without everybody having to see me look this up?
Yeah, no problem.
All right, give me a second here. And I will just try to bring up very quickly the postdoctoral fellowships website to tell folks where to go and look for this. Yeah, you can find it directly on the EAR homepage. I actually just found it by doing NSF EAR postdoctoral fellowship into Google, and off it went. But Lena Patino, P-A-T-I-N-O, is the person responsible. And as I said, these are fellowships that are intended to go to folks within 3 years of getting their PhD. It's to go off, and it is a proposal that, if once awarded, goes to the fellow and not to the institution itself. You basically, I'm trying to do this as I'm reading live here because I'm not actually the person who handles this one directly as much as Lena does, since it's in her program. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to have to sort of punt on this one because I don't want to say something wrong by trying to do this live. If folks are interested in that, I would definitely suggest talking to Lena. We do have postdoctoral fellowships that they come into Lena's program, and they come in, they are reviewed in the individual, what we call core programs, so like Earthscope and geophysics and tectonics and so on and so forth. And they get reviewed by our panels. They come into the regular panel process. And, you know, Lena comes to the panel and she explains to the panel, this is a postdoc fellowship proposal, this is not a standard NSF research proposal, and folks then discuss the merits of the proposal, but they are discussed by the regular panels in addition to the research that she goes. That's basically the sort of process. You have to be a U.S. citizen or have a green card, effectively, at the time of application. You have to either be a graduate student or be within 3 years of receiving your PhD. You have to have in the proposal both research and education plans that fit within the work that we do here in the Earth Sciences Division. You're going to be naming a host institution that you want to go and work with, and who you're going to work with at that host institution that are different from where you got your doctoral degree. So you are going to be going someplace else to work with somebody new. And you can't basically have that in as a proposal to the postdoc program while you also have it in as a proposal that's under consideration by some other program inside NSF. You can only submit one per year per person, and that's basically sort of the fundamental rules that go with this. I don't know, other comments and suggestions. I would suggest going and looking at the solicitation for the program, and then when you've taken a look at that, then getting in touch with Lena for any further backup and details would be the way to go.
Okay. Next question is from Stasia Gordon, and it's asking, are there a minimum number of ad hoc reviewers for each proposal?
Yeah, there are. NSF policy requires 3 ad hoc reviewers per proposal unless there is a specific waiver granted for the particular program, in which case it will say that somewhere in the solicitation. But the standard is 3. You've got to have 3. There are some proposal mechanisms at NSF that's not true of. There are 2 sort of special types of proposals. There's one called an eager, early grant for exploratory research. An eager is basically a pilot project, and you want to go off and do some project, and it's specifically a pilot project for something that isn't going to work through the standard review process. And so, you know, they're small, they're relatively short, and those don't necessarily have to go out for external review, although a program officer always has that option. And the other one that's out there is a rapid, which is what it more or less sounds like in that case. Again, but really what this is, a project that is to go out and collect some data or do some science that is ephemeral. If you don't go out and do it right away, you're not going to get it done, kind of thing. Big earthquake is hit, we want to go collect aftershock data. Big volcanic eruption is going on, we actually want to go there and do something while it's there. You know, if there's been a tsunami, we want to go and do field mapping of the area, these sorts of things. And those also don't have to go out for external review under most circumstances, but they can if the program officer wants. Other than really those, and anything that has a waiver, the standard NSF proposal is a minimum of 3 ad hoc reviewers.
Okay, great. Next question is from Chris Kim, and there's several parts of it. The first bit, how commonly do PIs submit to different divisions? E.g., I've been funded by NSF EAR for low-temp geochemistry, but my work also overlaps with goals of NSF CHE, which is environmental chemistry. Is it more common for PIs to stick with one division their entire career, and are there any pros or cons to seeking funding from a different division as appropriate to the proposed science?
Okay, that's an interesting question. Let's start with sort of the simplest version of submitting projects in different divisions, something where you're going inside the Directorate for Geosciences or staying within a given directorate. There is work out there that I'm aware of that PI was funded to do studies through a program in the Earth Sciences Division that were focused on using a particular technique to look at basically deformation of the surface, but then turned that technique around and used it to actually look at atmospheric properties and submitted a proposal and an award off to atmospheric property to the Atmospheric Sciences Division to get an award out of that. That can work, certainly. Other things that are out there, if you submit a proposal that crosses disciplinary boundaries, and we think as a program officer, hey, this is an interesting one. I wonder if the ocean sciences guys in marine geology and geophysics might be interested, or the folks in geoprisms might be interested. We can go over and talk to them. If they are, we talk to the PI and say, hey, we are interested. We think your proposal might be of interest across this disciplinary boundary, and they're interested in reviewing it, and we'd like to review it too. And so we're going to do a co-review, just so you know. That's kind of the simplest level of that. Beyond that, people being funded across multiple divisions, certainly I know there are folks who have done that successfully throughout their careers. The only real advice I have on that one is that as you are, and it's not that much different from the sort of the general advice, but when you're doing it, you need to be thinking about the audience for which you're writing each proposal and what sells, what seems like a good fit for a particular division, even if it's basically similar idea, but you might have to write it in a way, you may have to present it in a way that maps completely differently, so you have to be prepared to do that. There are people who are successful in doing that. There are other people who spend their entire careers going to one or two programs or one division inside NSF to get funding and are successful doing it that way. There's really no hard and fast rule on that one. And you said that there were multiple parts to that question.
Yeah, I think you sort of addressed the whole question, but yeah, I mean, the general question was how commonly do PIs submit to different divisions, and then he gave a specific example. So I think you took care of the whole thing.
Okay.
Next question is from Gina Schmalzel, and she asks, how do you submit so that your proposal will be considered by multiple NSF programs, for example, Earthscope and Tectonics?
Okay. Well, there's basically two ways to do that. The first way, the formal way, is on the NSF proposal cover sheet. Every proposal has to have every proposal that we deal with in Earthscope, for example, is going to come in and say Earthscope as the managing program. But there's also a box on the cover sheet that lets you designate other programs that you would like to have it considered by. So you can, it's in here and it says, for consideration by NSF organizational units, and you can list multiple programs in that. And that formally notifies all of the programs that, hey, this proposal has come in for consideration by all of your programs. The less formal way of doing it is when there's a middle of the road. And that way is the formal way to do it. That is the way that you really let us know. People can submit proposals that when we look at them as program officers, we say, hey, there's a potential match in some way with Tectonics, to pick up the example that Gina put out. And then we could contact the program officers over in Tectonics and say, here's this proposal that's come into our scope as managing program. What do you think about it? What do you think about a co-review? And and we got an email from the PI who says that that's something that they would like to do. It's better if you're going to do it that way to actually put it on the cover page and ask for it. But you can also, we also can look at them and see these matches. So there's the two ways. There's the formal way to do it, which is to ask for it on the cover page. There's a box. You fill out the cover page box with what's going on. And then if we see a match that's potential out there, then we can bring it to the other program's attention as well, that even if it isn't actually in the cover page box.
Okay, next question's from Victor Sai, and he asks, often one doesn't know if a project will be successful until after it's done. Is there a way to approach this dilemma without doing the project before submitting the proposal?
That is it's almost an existential question, isn't it? It's actually a really good question, though. All I can tell you is sort of from experience of this, the compelling proposals that we get, the ones that are really compelling, really competitive, have identified some clear problem that they're going after. And they have a convincing argument for how they want to go and attack this problem, and are able to describe that approach in a way that convinces their peers that they can actually go and do it. Really, in some circumstances, you can go and do a bit of pilot work. A small project, you can get some small amount of data out of some archive, or do a small experiment in the lab, and you have some preliminary results that you can use to argue more strongly that this would actually work, because hey, we've tested it on this small scale and haven't run into any problems. And the theory says it ought to work, so we believe this will work for a larger scale, and here's how we would do it. That's certainly a stronger case to be made if you can show that kind of behavior. But yeah, it's research, right? Oftentimes you don't know how things are going to work out in the end until the experiments themselves are done. But you do need to have a good idea and a convincing set of arguments and a convincing plan that will take you down that road. But yeah, you're right. It is sort of a dichotomy there.
Okay. Next question is from Donajay Ravat, and he asks, in prior support, you mentioned that only one closely related prior support needs to be discussed. Is this known by reviewers? Are the rest of the more subtle issues also known by the reviewers?
Well, the way that the proposals are to be dealt with are available, of course, through the grant proposal guide. Everybody has access to those rules. The question of whether or not, for instance, the reviewers know you only need to have one bit of prior support. If you have prior NSF funding and you have one or more awards, you only have to talk about the one that's most closely related and talk about that. It's certainly in the grant proposal guide. If I personally got a review from an ad hoc reviewer who commented negatively about something like that, and then when I go and look at it and I see it's compliant, it fits the rules, there's nothing to worry about here, I would discount speaking for myself personally, I would discount that particular aspect of that review. we're talking about something in panel and somebody raises a question, does this meet the rules? That's one of the things that we as program officers will do during panel is clarify, yes, this definitely meets the rules because of X, Y, and Z in the grant proposal guide. So that's a responsibility that we have as program officers to make sure that if something comes up in a review that somebody questions whether or not a particular rule has been met, we are the ones that have to look at it and make a judgment, has it been met? And if we think it has been, then when we write our recommendation, we comment, this reviewer said X, but in fact, it's not true, and so I discounted that portion of the review. Related to this, not actually the same question, but related to this, often people ask if it's the score, the rating of a review that matters. Do we just go by the average of the scores? The answer is no, we do not. We read the text, and that's really what matters to us. Is, if a review comes back and says, this is an excellent proposal, fund it, but you look at the text and it doesn't actually match that, this is an excellent proposal, but it has these problems. You're not going to say, okay, it's a 5.0. You're going to say there's something else going on here. I need to pay attention to these other comments. And so, no, it's not just the number. It's definitely the text. So, yes, we would look for questions about whether something is compliant, and we as program officers would deal with it.
Okay, next question is from Gabi Lasky, and she asks, with respect to early career opportunities, are there NSF grad student fellowships for foreign students? It seems that the regular ones are for U.S. citizens only, but we have an increasing fraction of foreign students.
All the ones that I know of have some form of limitation, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a program out there that I'm just not aware of off the top of my head. I'd actually be happy to look into that question because that actually probably is a question that would be really useful to know more details on. I can't say absolutely for sure that there are no such opportunities, but we can try to find out.
Okay, next question from Anna Kelbert. She asks, what are the requirements for a competitive career award? Do you need a thorough 5-year research plan?
Well, the career proposals, as I said, they're big proposals. They're meant to be 5-year proposals. They do have to have both research and education components to them, and they have to show an integration of the two of them and how this whole plan, the research plan and the education plan, come together to make a true whole. To be a unified project, that you need both of those two aspects in order to be able to accomplish this unified project. So, a career proposal is a fairly significant project, and it needs to be a fairly significant project. Some other things that are associated with the career proposals, you can only submit one career proposal per year. You have only you can only submit a career proposal 3 times. So if you submit and the proposal is not successful that time, you have 2 more chances. It does need to be, as I say, it does need to be from pre-tenure person. But yeah, it does have to be a substantial project, something that is going to warrant an extended amount of support over an extended period of time, because it's a minimum of basically it's a minimum of in the Earth Sciences division anyway, and the geosciences except for the polar programs, it's a $400,000 minimum 5-year project. So it needs to be substantial. And when reviewers look at these, they will often judge it in that way. It's a career proposal. Is this project significant enough to be a career proposal? It's a bit hard to give you a very specific what's significant, but yeah, it does have to be significant.
Okay. Next question is from Kaglar Yardam, and Kaglar asks, what if your proposal is multidisciplinary and doesn't quite fit in any specific program?
So, well, there are a variety of things out there for that, and it depends on the details for a particular project. There are some programs at NSF, particularly cross-cutting initiatives at NSF, that exist to specifically foster multidisciplinary science. One of the reasons EarthScope exists as a program inside the EAR is to foster interdisciplinary science and multidisciplinary science. So there are some programs that have that as a specific aim, and depending on the details of a given project, it may be a fit for one of those. A more general thing would be if you had a project that has some features that fit well in program X and some other features that fit well in program Y, that would be a prime candidate for a co-review between the two programs. And if the review were to go well, then perhaps the recommendation of co-funding across the two programs. And we have that option open to us as program officers, and I will say that co-review happens quite regularly in the Earth Sciences Division, so that's not at all an unusual thing. So that's really the two answers. Is some programs actually exist to foster it, and in other cases you can do co-review across programs.
Okay. Next question is from Yubi Nasruddin, who is actually joining us from Morocco. And Yubi's question is it possible to participate in an NSF proposal as the leader of the proposal if you're a scientist from another country?
Generally speaking, NSF funds the American side of activities. So generally speaking, a U.S. investigator is the PI for an NSF proposal. There are projects in which there are programs, specific programs, in which the activities, international activities, are actually supported by NSF, and that's typically through our Office of International Science and Engineering. There are, in fact, some programs that specifically look for that kind of a direct linkage, and a proposal to that program has to have it. But typically, the NSF proposals need to come in with a U.S. investigator as the PI, unless the solicitation for a given program says otherwise. At least that's my experience. If I had in front of me my other colleagues, they may know of methodologies that I'm not aware of.
Okay. Next question is from Edwin Nissen. And Edwin asks, I wondered what advice Greg could give about resubmitting a proposal that was rejected in a previous round. Is that frowned upon? Or if you take on board the reviewers from the first proposal, is it recommended?
Okay, so let's take the case where you have a proposal that comes back as a decline, unfortunately. If you're thinking about a resubmittal, you want to look very carefully at the reviews that you receive and at the comments from the program officer that you receive. Sometimes the comments will explicitly say, here are what the major issues were with this proposal that led us to recommend a decline, and these need to be addressed if a PI is going to resubmit this proposal for consideration again. If you're going to do that, take those seriously, because that's us trying to help you understand really what it was that led us to where we went. Sometimes, unfortunately, the answer is simply, this is actually a really good proposal, but we just don't have enough money, and that's a really sad statement to have to write, but it does happen. But sometimes there are specific things that could be improved. Take a look at that. Think about it carefully. It's no fun to get somebody to write a letter saying no, and here's what we thought needed to be improved. But sit down and think about that carefully and think about that advice, and then get in touch with the program officer. But then if you choose to go forward with a resubmission, it's really, really good, very good idea to be in writing a competitive proposal to explicitly say, this is what we changed in the new version of this proposal in response to the answers, in response to the reviewer comments on the prior version. Actually, some people actually put it in a box on a page so that you can actually see it very quickly. This is a change. That's a useful thing for demonstrating that you've taken the feedback seriously, you've considered it, you've tried to improve the project in response. Um, can't guarantee this is true for everybody, but when I get something like that as a program officer, I will often try to see if I can get an overlapping set of some of the people who looked at it the previous time and some of the people who've never seen it before, to try to get a viewpoint on generally how that's viewed. Um, so, you know, it's certainly, if somebody gets a letter from the program officer saying, I encourage you to consider resubmission, but if you're going to do that, you need to, you know, consider these changes. That's an encouragement to go ahead, but do take it seriously to make those changes and make it explicit what you have changed. Will be a real plus to help with the review process.
Okay, great. And I have our last question. This is from Emily Strong, and she is wondering who is the best person to talk to about a potential eager submission.
So this one is, I will tell you right away, the answer is call the program officer for the program to which you're thinking of submitting. When I say call, I really do mean it. Call that person. Get in touch with us if you're thinking about putting an eager, if you're thinking you'd like to put an eager in, because we're supposed to say yes before you do. And that really is the first person to call and really the important first call to do. And take a look inside the grant proposal guide for the rest of the details about what needs to happen on an eager and how it's different. But yeah, contact the program officer for the program that you're considering submitting to, and that's your first step with an eager.
Okay. Well, I think that's it for questions. I think I'm impressed. The question session went even longer than the webinar. I think that's a first.
I'm actually pleased that I managed to not talk for too long then, because that gives people lots of chance. Lots of good questions. Thanks.
Yeah, no, this was the most, I think, stimulated discussion we've had with questions in a very long time in the webinar series. So that's great. I think people got a lot out of it. And yeah, so, well, Greg, let me thank you again. And it's almost the end of the workday on the East Coast, so we can all wrap up and head home. So anyway, yeah, thank you very much. For people who are still in the audience, thank you for attending. This will be buffered, archived, and put up on YouTube in the next couple days. And I'm getting lots of happy remarks, Greg, on the questions window. People are saying thank you. So
well, thank you all very much for listening and for the fantastic questions, and thanks for the opportunity.
great, great. Well, we'll see everyone out there at the next webinar. And Greg, thanks again, and I'm sure I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yep. Bye bye.